Unit 6. Still doing equations. And we said we are on day 7. I'm going to keep picking on you, honey. I'm sorry. But you answered so well that I'm going to keep picking on you, okay? Goal of any equation. Actually, I'm going to pick on both of you because Macy's the one who actually knows this. Macy, what's the goal of any equation? You know this, bless you. Starts with an I.
To isolate the variable?
There you go. So the goal of any equation is to isolate the variable. That means we should have, now we're back to Emma. That means we should have how many variables, Emma? That means we should have just one variable. And when I say just one variable, one x, one y, one z. Do we want 3 z's?
No.
No. Do we want negative 5 z's? No. We want just one. Okay. This is what confused you the most that I tried to help as we were doing our warm-up and our homework, because I made you read it a lot. Okay? When we have a number smack dab next to a variable, it means what? So when we have a variable smack dab next to a number, it means what? Go ahead, Devin.
Divide.
No? It means multiplication. The inverse is division, but it means multiplication. And if I had an important thing for the day, that was it right there. So if we have a number smack dab up against the variable, it means multiplication. So I'm going to give you a couple examples. Let's go 7r. That truly means 7 multiplied by r. Everybody good with that? Let's say I've got negative 3k. Kylie, for negative 3k, what does that mean?
Negative 3.
Okay,
And or multiplied by k.
there you go. It would be negative 3 multiplied by k. When there is something smack dab in front of that variable, it means multiplication. Let's use a V for Valentine's Day. So we've got a negative V. What, Macy?
What?
Why is that funny? You're like laughing and smiling Valentine's Day. So now we've got negative V. Emma, I'm back to you, honey, because you keep telling me this. It looks like my variable's isolated, right? Why isn't it? Because there's a negative sign in front of it. We want just one V. This is not isolated. How many V's do we have there? How many V's do we have right here? Brendan?
1.
There's only one V here? No, not just one.
Negative.
Ah, this is really negative 1v. If there is a negative sign in front of my variable, that means there's negative one of them, which means it's not isolated. That means that it's really negative 1 multiplied by v. You need to understand that if there is a negative variable, it is not isolated because we want just one of them. Not a negative one, a positive one. So you will see problems that will look like this. Negative x equals 5. And you will still have to show work for this type of problem. What is my first step always, Jojo? Kylie. Jojo, so what is it? Find the balance point. The balance point is always where, Cole? At the equal sign. We know this is not isolated because Emma has told us probably 73 times now that the variable has to be 1. Well, it's not 1. There's a negative sign in front of it. So really, how many variables do I have there, Weston? I have a negative 1. And I would draw in that imaginary negative 1. Because now, when we read this, it's negative 1x equals 5. Well, negative 1x is not addition. Negative 1x is not subtraction. When we have a number smack dab next to a variable, it means multiplication. So now, Nevaeh, what is the inverse operation of multiplication? Division. And we are going to divide by negative 1. And you're like, but why, Mr. H? Because again, the goal, as Emma told us, is to isolate the variable and get it to be 1. A negative divided by a negative is positive. 1 divided by 1 is 1. Well, 1 what? 1x. Because our goal is to isolate that. A positive divided by a negative is negative. 5 divided by 1 is 5. Questions there? Let's do another one. 37. Actually, let's make it negative 37 equals negative v. So at this point, everybody should be raising their hands because we should feel good about this. We should be like, these are basic. We got this. If you see a problem like this, you know that it's going to be pretty darn easy. So what is our first step every single time, Jojo? Find the balance point. There you go. So, Brendan, where's my balance point always? The equal sign. Emma, how many variables do I have? Yeah, I have negative 1. So am I isolated? No. Because this is really negative 1 v's. Okay. Ms. Vavra, what do I need to do? Isolate the variable. How do we do that? So right now it says negative 37 equals negative 1v. Well, negative 1v is not adding. Negative 1v is not subtracting. What does it mean when we have a number smack dab next to a variable? So what is the inverse of multiplication? What is it? So we are going to divide. What do we need to divide by, Tegan? Negative 1. The reason we're dividing by a negative 1 is we want a positive 1v. That's how we isolate it. So negative 1 divided by negative 1 is positive 1. Positive 1 what? Positive 1v. You all right, Braden? Okay, your sleeve all right? Okay. So now we have negative 37 divided by negative 1. A negative divided by a negative is positive. We'll leave them with v equals 37. Questions on these? Okay. You're going to do 2 problems on your own. Raise your hand once you have them. Actually, I lied. You're going to do 3 problems. You need to get all 3 done first, then raise your hand, and I will gladly check them because I want to see how we're doing. So number 1 is going to be let's make it negative x over 4 equals 3. Number 2 is going to be 17 equals negative x. And number 3 is going to be 7x equals negative 21. So show your work, solve those 3. Once you've got them, raise your hand. One's a little bit trickier. Say it to yourself first to figure out what operation is the inverse. Use mathematical language when you say it. If you want to skip number 1 first and come back to it, that's fine as well. But Noah taught us how to say number 1. I agree. I don't. But that means that we're making this. I agree. Think about what you're doing in number 2 as far as the mission. Yes, but you don't understand why that's any of your operations. Which one does you understand? What number goes with the negative x? This would be less than 1. So put a 1 in here. And then you need to divide. That's agree, but you need to show work. Or you wouldn't divide it. Read the problem to yourself and tell me what the problem says. I don't agree with any of those. You're missing signs in every single one. I don't agree with any of them. You're missing signs in every single one. You didn't write down the whole problem. Is the negative sign with this? Is that how I wrote it? Okay, number 1, is that how I wrote it? Okay, yeah, we'll change it. Okay, so right now, the biggest problem that I'm seeing in number 1 is you trying to change how I wrote it. A lot of you are seeing this. And Noah, can you read this correctly for me? Wait, what?
Negative
x divided by 4 equals 3. So it's a division problem. If it's division, we know the inverse has to be what, Weston? Multiplication. My problem is when you guys have copied it from here to the board, or from the board to your paper, I'm seeing this. I'm seeing you attach that negative sign with the x. Could it be like that? Sure. But I have a negative right out in front. I know this whole fraction is a negative. So I'm going to really assign that negative to which number? Not to the x, but to the 4. So now when we multiply, how do we get a positive x? Well, if it's already, because how many x's are up top? 1. So this is 1 over negative 4. So to isolate that, we have to use the multiplicative inverse, which is multiplying by the negative 4. Remember, we're really multiplying negative 4 by 1. That gives me negative 4 divided by negative 4. But for most of you, what you need to understand is if we multiply by the denominator, we're just left with 1x. So now my x comes down and it's positive. 3 multiplied by negative 4 is negative 12. Good. That is what you get?
Yeah.
Good. Did I tell you wrong? Okay. Number 2. Find the balance point. Our variable's not isolated. Emma's told us plenty of times. There's a negative x. We know that's negative 1x. Well, negative 1x is multiplication. For those of you who said, Mr. H, I don't know how to do this, I'm having trouble, paying attention now would be a good start. So if negative 1x means multiplication, the inverse of multiplication is division. We want a positive x. So we have to multiply by the number and the sign. Because negative 1 divided by negative 1 gives me a positive 1. Well, positive 1 what? Positive 1x. If I divide by negative 1 on one side, I have to divide by negative 1 on the other. That gives me negative 17. Last but not least, this is 7x equals negative 21. Find your balance point. 7x, number right next to a variable means multiplication. So the inverse is division. 7 divided by 7 is 1. 1 what? 1x. Negative 21 divided by 7 is negative 3. Questions? Your homework will be 1 through 10. Now listen carefully. If you do not show me the work with the inverses, you will not receive credit. Does everybody understand that? This is the 3rd day now that I have said, if you do not show work, that means finding the balance point, showing me the inverse operations, you will not receive credit.